Okay, it's ready now. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for. Okay, it's been transcribed and it's also going live now. So welcome to FY27 Spending Affordability Advisory Committee of Howard County again. This is our second meeting. Our first meeting was very dynamic. It's an in-person meeting, also very nice to see some old friends and some new friends there. So let's just continue the discussion. Today's virtual meeting, we have keynote speakers from DPZ that will provide some really good information. Here, I have a list on the screen. These are the revised list of the meetings for the rest of the month and also next month. On that, I have confirmed most of the speakers. They're just teeny fine-tuning from the previous version. So this week, today is most DPZ presentation about the county's demographic and development trend. These are very important subject and also always very informative and interesting. A lot of information have implication directly. County's revenues, as you know, both demographic changes there, as well as the new constructions, the development that impact both revenue and expenditure side for now and also for the future. So it's a really relevant subject. And next week, we will have also very good discussion led by EDA that they will provide an update on local economy. And also there will be a business panel discussion, share perspective from business regarding how's everything going, as well as do they have any thoughts about the overall policy environment or any suggestions there. So with that, I will, by the way, as we said before, to the extent possible, after each of the presentations there, if we have time left there, we encourage folks there to chime in and not only ask questions, but also if we have major takeaways you want to share with the group or have some preliminary thought on here, these are something maybe we should consider including in the report. We can start early discussion. Eventually, we'll have time to set aside time in February to discuss the report writing and recommendation. But along the way, I think if you have any thoughts, feel free to share with the group. With that, I will hand it over to Jeff, and I will stop sharing the screen. By the way, Jeff is also joined by Mary Kendall, Deputy Director from DPZ, who's an expert on the HOCO by design. So I'm sure she can provide a lot of expertise as well. Thank you. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you once again this year. I'm glad to be back to present an update of Howard County's demographic and land use trends, which, as Holly mentioned, has budget implications given tax revenues, et cetera. So I'm joined here with Deputy Director Mary Kendall as well, who can be available for questions relating to HOCO by design and future housing related to that and future policies related to HOCO by design. So let me begin. Let's see here. So I'm going to be talking about basically Howard County population growth trends and future projections. So we update our projections every year. Recently updated them at the end of last year, basically. And then talk about growing population diversity, primarily some characteristics on age and race, and also the pipeline of new housing by type of housing, what's currently in the pipeline for new growth, and what's the current land use capacity. And then a little bit on jobs trends, not much. I know there's going to be future presentations more detailed on jobs when more data comes out on that. So first, the population growth. This is a chart that you've all seen before. Basically, it shows the projections or historical population in Howard County from 1950 through 2020. You can see there's been steady growth in Howard County. The last census indicated that there was about 332,000 residents in Howard County, up from about 278,000 the decade previous in 2010. This shows the growth by decade. And it's an interesting chart because it shows which decades had the most growth in the county in terms of both population and also percent change. So the 80s saw the most in the population growth in absolute terms, about 68,700 increase. And then in the 90s, it slowed down to 60,000. You can see that we're still growing, but a little bit slower each decade. Last decade, from 2010 to 2020, the growth rate stayed the same at about 16%, but we had a little bit more population for that decade from 2010 to 2020. And this shows the same data, but then it has these red charts, which are the future projections that we updated at the end of last year. And we based the projections on our housing unit projections, which I'll show in a little later in this presentation. So as we know what's in the process, because DPZ, Department of Planning and Zoning, processes all subdivision plans. So we know it's in the pipeline. We also have a land use map, so we know the future capacity. We also know the pace of growth, which is tied to the general plan, which paces growth. And so we estimate, based on new housing by unit type, how many people per households to kind of project the future population of the county. So it's purely based on the built environment. It's not based really on other demographic trends. So we do our best with those projections, and you can see that over the next decade, next 5 years actually, what the chart shows from 2020 to 2030, we're going to have about 360,000 people in the county, increasing to about 380,000 by 2040 in 10 years. And this shows the red here is the projected. So you can see we're expected to experience a slowdown in growth, primarily because of housing unit growth is slowing. And that's a result primarily of there's not as much land as there used to be to build new housing, which you'll see in a minute with some slides that show that. So the next decade is about half the rate of growth, 8% compared to 16%. And then after that is 5%. This should be kept in mind that this is just based on current zoning, current land use capacity. So when the county does a comprehensive rezoning, which is expected most likely in the near term with the next administration, then things like the Gateway Master Plan, which was recently adopted, that land will be rezoned, which will allow for more housing units. So this capacity is likely to change. So this is just based on current zoning at the current time. I wanted to look at, so I had projected, about 28,000 over the decade. And then this is what we estimate through 2025. So about halfway through that period, we've grown by about 13,300 people. So it's almost the 28,000, not quite. So it looks like we're on track to reach the estimate of what we thought in 2030. I did add this. This is the Census Bureau. They do these intercensal population projections based on birth rates, death rates, migration patterns, both domestic and international. And they're projecting less population in Howard County, but it's last decade, they also did the same thing. So I was tracking population based on housing, while the census tracked population based on those other demographic characteristics I mentioned. And it's less. And but the same thing happened last decade. So we'll see what happens. It's, you have different methods of population projection and they come out differently. So that is that. And then this chart shows a little bit of characteristics of the population. So population by age. And this is important to show because it shows the aging of the population, the 65 plus in particular, is growing, whereas the other populations aren't growing as fast. And you can see back in 2000, the 65 plus was relatively small. It's expected to grow up to this amount here I don't have the numbers unfortunately, but you can probably see from the chart, it's about 50, 60,000 people, 65 plus in the county. And it's been growing relatively rapidly the last 20 years as the baby boomers have aged. Baby boomers are those that were born between 1946 and 1964. So they're all, getting to be over 65 at this point. This breaks it down a little bit more. So this is the 55 plus by these cohorts here. So the 55 to 64, the 65 to 74, 75 to 84, and 85 plus. Each of these bars represent the population of those cohorts during that year.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
If you go back to that last slide for a minute, if
Sure.
it would be possible to add in the actual numbers,
Yes, I can do that. Yeah.
that would be helpful than trying to guess.
Right. Yeah, that's not a problem at all. And you must have read Holly's mind because Holly had the same comment. So I just didn't have time to put them in, but that's definitely a good suggestion for sure.
Thank you.
I'll
Thanks.
add those. Because I know you tend to use these in your reports at times. So yeah.
Yep. And just one more question there. Has that changed since last year?
It has a little bit because when I redo the population projections, I provide them to BMC, the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. They have this thing called P-optics, which is a population. It's a cohort model. So then it's changed a little bit, but not much, not significantly.
Okay, thanks.
So this is really interesting, though. I always like to show this because if you look at the 85 plus, it's going to be growing significantly, and so that really, portends to the need to look at county services in the future to really care for and provide services for our aging population. Same with the 75 to 84. You can see that increasing pretty rapidly, particularly over the next 20 years. And then this shows the lower population, the number of youth and young adults in Howard County from 2000 to 2024. And in particular, you can look at the 5 to 19, which is an approximation of the school age population. So it's grown relatively quickly through 2000, but since 2000, it has been, and it's expected to continue to slow down based on the cohort estimates, and in large part that has to do with just the demographics, the way the age structure is in the county, and also birth rates are slowing compared to the past. So those two factors really indicate why the school age population is slowing down. And then I looked at the school system's own projections.
Hey, Jeff,
Yes.
before you go on, this is Barb Glenn.
Sure.
Following on to Todd's focus on that other chart and then looking at this one, the age group of 20 to 44 is actually the largest. Is that not true? I'm looking at colored bars, so.
Yeah, so let's see. So, well, it is true for this group. So it's over 100,000, right? It's going to be probably about 110,000 by 2040. And if I go back, yes, it's definitely the largest, because then if you look at the 55 to 64, it's less than 50. Yes. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if, even though you mentioned land use and upstarts in housing, it'll be those people are living somewhere. So I just wanted to point that out. That's
right.
I hadn't noticed that before. I thought the seniors were the biggest part of the bar, but thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. One thing to keep in mind, though, also is that this is a pretty big range. So this is about 20 to 44, 24 age 24 ages compared to here. So that's another thing. So it's just grouped that way. So, but yes, you're absolutely correct. Those are the people that will be, creating homes in the future and needing housing moving forward. So I wanted to look at the school projections. So this came from the school's latest educational facilities master plan last June. So they come out with an educational facilities master plan every summer based on they redo their projections annually. So this is their projections that were done last summer. And in part, it's based on the housing projections that DPZ, that we give to them. And really the thing to pay attention to is the latest projections with this is the orange bar. So they're projecting that the school age population is going to be declining into the future based on their model. These other lines were the previous projections. So for example, in the blue was what they had projected back in 2019. So basically back at this point, they had projected the population to continue to grow. And then of course, COVID happened, and then there was a big drop in population in COVID. And there was always a question of, okay, is the county, and it wasn't just Howard County, it was all counties in Maryland. In fact, all places in the US had experienced declines in public school enrollment. So the question was it going to rebound? And so there was thinking it was going to, and there was trends, but it really hasn't. And so now the new trend is that it's going to be a decline. So the question is, why is that, right? Why is that? And I think the answer is from these three factors. So there is a trend of lower birth rates, and that wasn't really picked up until relatively recently, the last few years. If you look at birth rates, that happened basically after 2015 to 2020, and even beyond that, the birth rates are lower. So then the number of children that end up in the school system 5 years later is going to be less because you have lower birth rates. Another big factor is lower home resales, primarily due to interest rates. So a lot of people locked in, as we all know, at the lower interest rates, sub 3% in many cases, back in the late 2010s. And so, now interest rates had been closer to 7%. And so people don't want to move and have to have higher interest rates. So the typical churning of resales has been impeded because of that. There was an interesting article in the Washington Post I read that interest rates are now, around 6%. And the article was saying that might spark some movement in home resales now that interest rates are a little lower. But still, another person said that it might take 5 years or longer because you still have a lot of people locked into those 3%, 4%, 5% even, rates. And again, this isn't just a Maryland thing or a Howard County thing. This is a national problem. And as of course, we all know that there's a national issue with needing for new housing to house people as the country continues to grow. So the third is lower new home construction. So as I mentioned before, there's just not a lot of land left in Howard County. So based on current zoning, we've been experiencing lower rates of new homes being built. So because of that, you're going to have less students coming into the school system. This is their latest projection.
Jeff? Yeah,
Yes.
one other thing. I know it came up last year with Dan Lubley, I think in this committee, but also in adequate public facilities. And you don't mention it here, but he had mentioned that our capture rate of eligible students had fallen from 96% to 92%, meaning that in this case, not only is the universe of students getting smaller, universe of eligible students, but we're getting a smaller percentage of a smaller number. Is that reflected in these projections? Because that's a pretty significant number. If it's 4% of 55,000 students, that's 2,500, give or take, students that we're not capturing, that at 96%, our previous capture rate, we would be capturing. So maybe it's a issue for the school board or school planning, but I don't think that's not one of your bullet points, and I think it's a pretty significant number.
Okay. Yeah. So when you say capture rate, you mean students that are eligible, but they perhaps are homeschooled or go to a private school? So they're not capturing
exactly. So
okay.
Right. And the number last year was it had fallen from 96% of the eligible universe to 92%
Okay.
of the eligible universe, which would be a decline of roughly 2,500 students that we had previously captured.
Right.
And I don't know if that trend has been arrested or if that's reflected in the new orange line as well.
Yeah, I don't know either. So that would be a question to the school system.
I don't know whether, I think we have two representatives from the school system. I just don't know whether they're aware of anything on that, like Brian or Jackie. Do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, good morning. This is Brian Hall, Chief Financial Officer for the school system. I think that is, I don't know about the specific percentages, but certainly nationwide, we are seeing a trend post-COVID of people doing more homeschooling and exploring other options. But I do want to just point out that, 4%, when you're looking at basically each of our cohorts, each grade level cohort maybe has around 3,500 students. And so when you're looking at 4% of that, you're talking about 140, 150 students per year. And so, yes, it will add up over time, but we're losing maybe 300 students a year. And so, yes, certainly that is a part of it. But when you compare that to the overall school system enrollment of over 50,000 students, it ends up being, a drop in the bucket, a really relatively small number of handful of students.
I guess what I would be interested in seeing, to the extent that the data is even available, Brian, is what that trend looks like. What is our capture rate of our eligible student population? If it was 96 and it fell to 92 in a 5-year period, that's a pretty pronounced decline in the capture rate. And it's 2,000, 2,200, 2,300 students, and in any given year that doesn't seem like very much, to your point, but when we're looking at this 10-year trend, it's pretty significant.
Well, I think it's important also to note that that all happened within the 2 years directly following COVID and has leveled out since then. So it's not an ongoing trend, but something that COVID changed our world, and it changed how people educate their children in some ways. And so it appears at this point to be a one-time but sticky trend, more sticky than we would have imagined at the time.
May I add something?
Yeah,
This
please.
is
Thank
Jackie
you.
McCoy. Yes. This is the spending affordability, right, advisory committee. We're talking about number of students, but we're not talking about what it costs to educate students and the needs of the students have gone up. So where the number of students has gone down, the needs of the students have gone up, which means the cost have ballooned, not just because of the population, but because of the needs. So I think if we're going to be talking about the schools, we need to be talking more about the cost of educating per student rather than the number of students, because that is really what's driving the cost. It's not the number of students, the need, just like, you're talking about housing. Even if the interest rates do go down, people can't afford the cost of the houses, and their salaries haven't kept up with the cost of building the houses. So even if the interest rates go down, it won't make a significant difference in people getting into the market, because people may move, but folks won't be able to buy the homes that they're moving out of. So I think we have to look at it a little bit differently. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, those are all excellent points. And, the intent of my presentation is a demographic presentation, but certainly those are all valid points for sure.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
The projections are based on current land use. So when the new do they build or don't build in the new master plan? And if they don't build in the new master plan, which has more multifamily, won't that generate more students? More students, more school age students, potentially.
So your question is, if they build in the master plan, there'll be more multifamily? And so
more housing than is current. This is based on current zoning. The revised zoning will change this and add more housing, lots of more. Yeah, and a higher percentage of that will be multifamily,
right.
And that will change these generations. That has the potential to change this projection quite significantly, or not. Am I wrong?
Well, so let me say two things. So I'm going to be showing some future housing in a second, so I think it'll add some clarity to your question. But I think, yes, so the projections do not include, for example, the Gateway Master Plan rezoning, which is going to be about, I think it's 6,800 homes, something like that. Now, that's probably not going to get going probably though until beyond 10 years, quite frankly, because it's going to take time for that master plan to get rezoned and then to start, there has to be a market for it, and there has to be the landowners willing to start assembling land and building it. So that could be a longer term master plan beyond 10 years. This is a 10-year projection. It's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is that I had produced a report last year on looking at student generations by unit type. And the student generation coming out of multifamily is relatively low compared to single family detached and attached, particularly on the new multifamily that's being built now. So the yield rates in downtown Columbia, for example, for those new buildings down there are very, very low, like 0.031, which is about 10% of the typical 0.3% of apartments. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. That's not saying that the apartments in Gateway won't have children and that won't change in some fashion. That could change as well. So that's just a couple caveats with, along the lines of what you said. Yes, there will be more housing than what's shown here, but it's likely to be a longer term projection trend.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the question. So this is just to wrap up the school stuff is I looked at the latest September 30th official school counts, September 30th, 2025. So the beginning of the current school year. And this is what it shows. This does not include pre-K, but it does include special ed, which is the Cedar Lane. So the population for the school system dropped by 417 students, per their official counts. And that's about a 3.3% decrease from the peak in 2019, pre-COVID. Okay, so then a little bit about the characteristics of the population, population by race. I must have had those other charts out of order. I apologize for that, the age charts in there. Anyways, so the Asian and Pacific Islander population increased the most by about 25,000, followed by the African American population increase of 14,900. This is a 10-year growth from 2010 to 2020. And then the total Hispanic population increased by the third greatest, 10,600, followed by two or more races at 8,000. And the non-Hispanic white population decreased by 14,700, continuing the trends that have been happening really since 1990 or so. This is a chart that just shows the change by race over the last decade. You can see the greatest is, the Asian, second greatest is African American, followed by Hispanic, and then the white non-Hispanic decreasing. This is another way to show the data. So basically the percent of population by race. So Howard County is now considered a majority minority. The white non-Hispanic population is less than 50%. That happened several years ago at that point. And then what's happened since 2020? This comes from the census. They do their intercensal annual population estimates. And so that trend is continuing. So the last 4 years, the white non-Hispanic population has continued to decrease. This represents the different colors represent, or different shades represent each of the 4 years. And so the total decrease over 4 years is 7,465 in the white non-Hispanic population. And the Asian and Pacific Islander population, similarly to the last decade, increased by the most, followed by the African American population, followed by the Hispanic, and then the non-Hispanic, 2 or more races. And then I mentioned this before, so the components of change, what is the population increase? Where does it come from? There's 3 ways. One is natural increase, which is deaths minus births, or births minus deaths. I apologize for that. And it increases by 4877. So you have the annual numbers in the colors here. So the natural increase increased by close to 4,900. So Jacqueline, do you have your hand raised, please? or question?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Just as a terminology correction, as a mathematician, there's no such thing as a majority minority. White
Okay.
people are not a majority forever. It is whoever is the largest number is the majority. So please refrain from using majority minority. That's not a
Okay.
mathematical term. Thank you.
Okay, your point is well taken. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I think I will do that moving forward. And so domestic migration is the other way that population can grow, and that's basically the migration, the net migration from other places within the United States that end up in Howard County. So as you can see, we have a net domestic out migration from Howard County. So more people are leaving Howard County to other places than coming into the county from other places within the United States. And the greatest population increase is international migration over the last 4 years of 7,200. And so that's the trends. As birth rates increase, this will be, and as death rates increase, as birth rates decrease and as death rates increase because of the aging of the population, the natural increase is likely to not be as strong in the future. And international migration, given what's happening currently politically, is also likely not to be as strong in the future. Those are just two things to keep in mind.
Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
Yeah, have you talked to Luminous or to the school system about the loss of students as well as our overall population, given ICE activity in our community? Because we definitely have had ICE here.
Yeah, I haven't. No. Did you say Loomis?
Luminous. It's
Luminous.
it's the old FERN, Foreign Information and Referral Network.
Oh, okay, got it. Right. I know a Fern, so they have a new name. Okay. Yeah.
Tina Horn recently reported at a Wild Lake Village meeting that they've lost clients and that they are quite aware that ICE has been picking people up. So I mean, I'm not thinking that the numbers will be so great that it'll change significantly here, but I think it might have impact on the school system, and I think we should be aware of that issue.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It would be good to talk to them and see what they're seeing. You know, of course, this
Hey,
is,
Jeff.
yes.
Oh, go ahead and finish your
I was
thought.
just gonna say this is through 2024, so that impact, hasn't happened yet, but in this chart, but clearly it's happening moving forward. Yes?
Yeah, I had the same question, maybe in reverse. This is U.S. Census Bureau data released in March of 2025. So
Yes.
these are U.S. citizens, these changes, not
No, I think
folks in other.
I think the Census Bureau tracks all residents, not just citizens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good for me to know. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
That's their
Hey, Jeff.
intent anyways. Yes.
Yeah, quick question. It looks like if I'm looking at domestic migration, you said the numbers are negative, but it looks like the big spike was 21 to 22 and also 22 to 23. Looks like it at least the decrease was not as great at 23 to 24. Do you see that trend going forward? It looks like maybe it was a COVID thing with the 21, I would say between 21 and 23. Could it have been that? Could that have been COVID migration, and maybe it's going to level off going forward?
Yeah, it could be. I really don't know. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what happens next year, but yeah, it does look like there was less domestic migration last year, 23, 24. I'm trying to remember if during or shortly after COVID there was a uptick in people moving or not nationally. There could have been.
I remember Dr. Clinch before also mentioned that for several years now, in general, we have seen a trend of a negative domestic migration.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a bump, obviously, in COVID. It hit the county. The new census data shows kind of an out-migration. The IRS data, because of the government shutdown, the most recent data is also not available. But Howard County, for kind of breaking into your period, as you know better than I, got huge in-migration from rest of Maryland, prior to COVID, but since COVID, Maryland has been shedding population and county has been shedding population to domestic migration.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And that's also a statewide issue. I think Maryland has been losing net population.
Yeah, I can
much
that.
bigger statewide.
Yeah,
than Howard County.
The comptroller reported that in terms of revenue from income from in-migration versus loss from out-migration, the difference is between like $2.7 billion and a loss of 12. It's significant across the state.
Yeah, I run those for the county. It's
Yeah.
in the report, but that's also a normal thing because you tend to have retirees who have higher moving out. So it's a bad thing, and our tax climate as a state impacts that significantly. However, it's also it's almost always been the case, certainly for the last 5 to 10 years, that out migrants have higher incomes than in migrants.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right, so then going to new housing and land use, these are building permits issued from way back in 1979. And it really shows the trend of decreasing building permits over time. It also relates to the chart I showed earlier where we had the most significant population growth in the 80s. So we had a lot of housing construction in the 80s, and you can see the building permits go up. And that's another reason why APFO was created in the early 90s based on the 1990 general plan, which managed growth. So basically, the AFFO law was enacted in 1992, and it limited how many housing units could be built per year to about 2,000 a year. And that's what we saw during the 90s. And then when the Plan Howard, or the 2000 general plan came out in November of 2000, that general plan deliberately lowered the amount of new housing per year to 1,500. And again, the purpose of that is to enable adequate facilities, primarily schools and roads, but of course other facilities as well, public safety, parks, open space, et cetera. And so the county's had a very, I would say, successful growth management plan since 1990, trying to manage growth to be able to provide adequate facilities moving forward. It doesn't stop growth, it just limits how much can happen per year in order for the county to be able to have time to fund and build or construct new infrastructure to serve Howard County residents and employers. And so in the Plan Howard 2030, which was the last general plan, kept about the same pace of growth of about 1,500. And then the current general plan, Plan Howard 2030, which was adopted at the end of 2023, also kept about the same growth, but we've been experiencing slower growth primarily because of the amount of land available for new construction is less, and so we're having less housing units built. However, as I said, there's policies in the general plan, HOCO by design, that understands this and understands there's need for housing, and so it called for things like the adoption of the master plan, which DPZ worked on and adopted last year, and other comprehensive rezoning into activity centers. So the intent is to provide more capacity in the future to be able to provide more housing moving forward. But again, that seems to be likely to be, the reality is we don't have much land left. The future is going to be redevelopment. It's a lot more difficult to redevelop than to build on, vacant land. So yes, we may have more capacity, but it's going to be really take some time to be able to occur moving forward.
Thank you, Jeff. I just want to add a little bit to the tail end.
Sure.
Yeah, because the trend is coming down, but also specifically for the last few years on that there, it does have a lot of connection with the county's, it does have a lot of budget implications on that there. So to some extent, it helps ease a little bit pressure on some of the public structures related needs on that there. But on the other hand, on that, it does has some revenue constraints impact as well on that there. So as you know, last few years, a lot of revenues directly related to new construction has been stressed. And most recently, that coupled with some more national policy or economic environment there, that has continued. I just looked at the data last week, like school surcharge, for example, which directly related new residential constructions. Starting from January 2025, every single month, it has experienced a decrease from the same month a year ago. So fiscal year, currently in fiscal year 26, year to date, fiscal 26, it dropped by more than 60% from a year ago. And these are the money directly used to support school constructions there, and obvious permits, transfer accreditation tax, all those different things. And are relevant as well. So it does have quite some continuing and negative impact on the revenue side on that there. So it's just one thing that we still have to keep in mind. And later, Dr. Clinch, sometime in February, will do his presentation on the county's long-term and personal income growth there. Historically, I recall like some of the driver for the county's general fund revenue, property tax growth and income tax growth is also very relevant to one of the key drivers, the population growth and the new property growth on that there. So with that activity started to trend down, that also becoming a limiting factor on the overall operating budget growth as well, which has been starting a few years ago and looks like will continue based on this trend there. But thank you, Jeff. This is really very, very important information to know. Thank you.
Yeah,
Holly,
thank you. Yeah.
following up on that, since the school surcharge is a function of, I guess, three things. One is the number of units. Two is the square footage per unit. And three is the school surcharge per square foot. So it's the question is, one, the trend line that you cited, which is that, month over month, we're seeing a reduction in the school surcharge that's being captured by the county. It would be nice to see that on a chart. But given that it's a function of those three things, I don't know if it's possible, but it would seem to me that the data would be in the county. It would be interesting to know what are those drivers? The number of units times the square footage times the rate per square foot is generating that school surcharge. So what of those three is the primary contributor to that decline?
I can take a look on that, but I think it's mostly in aggregate, the units drop combined with the square footage, because the surcharge itself, if you remember,
Yeah.
actually the county
Yes.
raised the fees
It's indexed.
and
Yeah.
phased in
Yeah.
on that. So even with that, it's still dropping significantly. So it kind of tells the other factors have even a bigger impact.
Yeah. Yeah, because school charge increased from $1 something to like $8 in the last several years. So to get to your question, Todd, also, I have another chart. You see these peaks here? This is really
Yeah.
when with multifamily, we're building a lot more multifamily. And so that gets to your point of multifamily has less square footage. So the units are dropping, plus the type of units, the square footage of the units are dropping in generally moving forward. But there's a chart coming up that shows that. I wanted to show this. I think most of you that were on this committee back in 2018-19 remember that we had contracted with a company called Urban Analytics to do a fiscal impact study to analyze the impacts of the recent APFO amendments that were adopted in 2018 and actually became effective in large part in 2019. The biggest change was adding a high school test and also changing the middle school test capacity utilization, dropping it from 115% to 110%, and also reducing the capacity utilization test for elementary schools from 110% to 105%. And because of that, a lot more schools were closed beginning in 2019 to meet the needs of the school overcrowding. So there's a rationale for doing that. So the question was, what's the fiscal impact on that? Growth is growing relatively strong at 1,500. What would happen if growth slows? So we came up with an estimate that we gave the consultant of the projections. And so the amended APFO scenario, this orange represented the scenario of what would happen, our estimate of what would happen based on the more stringent APFO. And so we projected the orange to go like this, that beginning in 2022, the units would decrease because APFO is always looking 3 years ahead as applied when the plan first comes in. So when plans first came in 2019, it typically takes 3 years to plan for and build the units. So the change would start showing up by 2022. This is what we projected, the orange, and the black is what actually happened. And so it's interesting to note that our projections were really close on what happened since 2018. We had projected 9,900 units, and what actually happened was 9,000 units. And that's compared to the general plan total of close to 15,000 units. Now, having said that, it's not only because of the APFO changes, I don't think. I think that it would be really hard to attribute everything to that. Also, things that happen on the general market, like COVID, and the general amount of land that's running out in Howard County also has a big impact in the market. So in a certain sense, this is just luck, quite frankly, but it does kind of point out, though, that the changes to APFO did have probably some impact in the change of growth over the last several years. Now, because the school population is decreasing, the number of schools closed is not nearly as much as it had been a few years ago. There's only 9 elementary schools closed, for example, school district closed to development, compared to 18 the prior year. So the APFO impact is not likely to be as strong as it has been in the recent past. But I just kind of wanted to point this out because this group, the Spending Affordability Advisory Committee, had contracted with Urban Analytics to do this exercise. Todd, this gets to your point about the types of units being built. And so lately we've been building more apartments, not the last few years, well, even, so like last year in 2025, of the 716 units built, most of them, 379, were apartments. So the square footage would have an impact on that. There's also less students coming out of apartments as well. So the impact on schools is less. So they're paying less school charge. So there's a rational nexus between that as well. This shows the 13 years, the last 13 years compared to the previous 13 years since 2000 of the units by type. So it had been from 2000 to 2012, about 44% of units were single family detached, 28% attached, and 28% apartments. The last 13 years, there was less single family detached, 30%, single family detached, 27% townhomes or SFA units, and almost 42% apartment units.
Do you have a breakdown at all on that 42% apartment units? How many are age restricted?
We do.
Like what percentage?
Yeah, so I don't have that we do track that in our development monitoring system report. There's actually quite a few. There's a lot more age restricted lately built. And there's a lot in the pipeline.
I know.
Yeah. So that will come out when we issue the DMS report later this spring.
Do you have like just a guesstimate back of the envelope that you could share?
Yeah, unfortunately, because oh, you mean this thing right here? I don't remember, quite frankly.
Okay.
So, but I'll give that information to Holly and she could forward it to the committee.
Kind of following up, not specifically on age restricted, but I know, Jeff, you've referenced your backward looking number of 0.3 students per unit in multifamily. Is that trending down for one, Josh's reason, which is we have more age restricted units which aren't generating any students, and two, the character of the multifamily units now, at least in downtown, producing 0.03, 1/10 of your previous 0.3. So my question is, are we seeing that 0.3 trending downward for those reasons?
For new construction, definitely. For new multifamily construction, particularly units like in downtown Columbia and some of the units along Route 1 corridor, it's less students per household. Yeah. And that report details all that. So that might be good for the committee to bring that report back out to kind of look at that. So yeah, for new construction, for sure. As far as existing, the new construction is relatively small compared to the existing base. So the 0.3 still applies countywide. So there's still a large amount of students coming from multifamily coming, but the new units being built, a few hundred units per year, typically tend to have lower, given the type of units being built.
And do we know if Office of School Planning is in their forward-looking estimates still using 0.3 even for the new units, which are actually generating a lot less than 0.3?
No, they don't. So they look at student yield trends by new construction. So they know that, for example, if it's a new multifamily downtown Columbia, it's not going to generate 0.3. So they build that into their projections.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. This is just a map that shows all of the 700 plus building permits built in the county and where they're located. So it's all over the county generally. You can see the new downtown cultural arts center, 174 units, was under construction, and the Protection Commons also in downtown Columbia. And most of these are labeled, and you can see some of the bigger single family detached, for example, is the Westmount, which has been being built for the last, I guess, 8+ years, and it's almost finished. And these are 43 that were constructed this year. And then Turf Valley has some. Bethany Glen is an age-restricted project along Route 40. Wellington Farms also is another large development that's finishing up this year. And so you can see the 38 townhomes built there in 2025. So we track these things by location, which we then give to the school system so they can build them into their projections. So this is about our land capacity. So we have 127,600 units built as of September 30th, 2025. And DPZ processes plans, so we know what's in the pipeline. Permit stands for projects that, as of September 30th, have been issued a building permit, not built yet. So it's basically units under construction. Unbuilt means recorded unbuilt lots. So you have a subdivision plan where the lots have been recorded, and so they can now get a building permit to build a new unit. It might also include apartment units that have their site development plan approved that don't yet have a building permit. So there's about 1,900 of those. So that's next in line. So after these get built, and these will get building permits. And then as far as plans and process, these are new plans that DPZ is reviewing. And once approved, they'll move forward to be recorded lots or approved site plans. And this is our estimate of undeveloped. So it's basically the capacity of units on undeveloped land, and it also includes redevelopment estimates. For example, most of that actually is downtown Columbia. So the downtown Columbia plan adopted in 2010 had 6,200 units in the plan, and only about 25% of those have been built. So about 4,000 or so are included in this 10,000. This does not include the Gateway Master Plan because the zoning isn't in place yet. But once the zoning is in place yet, then we would include those and then estimate potential when they could be built in the future. So based on current zoning, we have about 17,900 unit capacity. This has been steadily decreasing over time as we've been building more units and the land is finite. This really shows, yes?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I have the math right, going back to the last slide, because you're saying it's 17,900 new homes based on current land use capacity. But with the math I think you just went through, there's really only 6,000 units that are undeveloped and kind of not in the plan yet, so to speak. or was it 4,000? Is it 6,000 in Columbia that are in that undeveloped category that are already in the Columbia?
4,000. I think
So it's really only 6,000 units plus Gateway that we can still influence.
Yeah, but there actually, I think it might be. I think there's like 1,000 in here from Columbia, so it might be 7,000. So Gateway, yes, but there's also the Hoco by Design also calls for other redevelopment of other activity centers and Columbia Village centers, for example.
Right.
So and that was presented last year. Mary had presented that. So there are other policies in Hoco by Design that could add more to that 7,000.
Which would primarily be a result of increased density in those activity centers, correct?
Yes, primarily multifamily.
Right.
Because there's not much single family detached homes left. The Hoco by Design also, however, looks at the need for all types of housing. And so when the county does comprehensive rezoning, there'll be an opportunity to provide more housing, such as missing middle and increasing the density in other parts of the county. And as you all know, there's a bill moving forward to enable accessory dwelling units to be built more easily in the county, recognizing there's a need more for housing. So I guess what I'm saying is there's other opportunities to provide for more housing besides just Gateway. And so next year, the next administration, the comprehensive rezoning will be, a very important, part of the county's future when that begins.
If we look at like existing multifamily structures that are 30 or 40 years old, if the land that they sit on gets an increase in density, up zones, let's call it, you could go from a 150 unit building to a 180 unit building when that building gets replaced.
Right. And that's happening in for example, in parts of downtown Columbia, the enterprise development, they have a series of 3 or 4 projects, like Roslyn Rise is an example, where the buildings are 40 years old, so they're tearing the older buildings down and renovating and adding more capacity. Yes, that is happening.
But we're really just kind of sniffing around the edges. I mean, the reality is, if there's only 6,000 or 7,000 units in that undeveloped category, the rest is just going to increase based on upzoning, increased density, or Gateway. I mean, that's kind of all there is. ADUs might add 1,000, 2,000. I don't know, not very many. So it's pretty modest, I guess, is the point.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, you need to build on land, and if your land is finite, then and redevelopment can be more difficult. So there is opportunities, but it won't be like it has been in the past. It's almost like the new normal. Maybe over the next 20 years, the county can expect between 500 and 1,000 housing units per year, as opposed to the previous 20 years, it was, between 1,500 and 2,000 units per year.
So the new Hoco by Design target of what, 1,400 a year, we're never going to hit that.
Well, again, I don't want to say never because, comprehensive rezoning can have a big impact, but it can obviously be contentious when you talk about density. So it's to be determined, right? But it's more difficult, I think, redevelopment than the past when you had open land for sure.
Right. And we're not even taking up comprehensive rezoning for another year and a half.
So Mary, do you want to chime in from DPC to everybody's point that we have very limited land for development, but the original Hoco by Design did project 1,200 to 1,400 a year, assuming obviously the market needs and the relevant regulatory rezoning change will happen in the future on that. There, do you want to comment a little bit?
Yeah. So do you want me to share my screen to share what we've got in the general plan?
Yeah, can you do it temporarily, and then we'll come back to that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So this is what we have in the general plan in terms of what our future growth potential could be. This is not factoring what the development potential may be in Gateway. So it's showing overall, as of 2019, we had 116,000 residential units, and we projected that based on the kind of redevelopment potential and rezoning recommendations in HOCO by design, that we could realize up to 143,000 units. So that's the full development potential in 2040. But again, as we said, that really depends on, you know, us being able to all these other factors, right? We have to get through comp rezoning, but then there has to be willing property owners, there has to be the market demand, there has to be the developers at the table, and then of course, the financing to facilitate these redevelopment projects. I mean, as we all know, mixed use redevelopment is not an easy task. And just to, since I know we were talking a lot about these activity centers, generally, those are these areas that we've identified in orange. So we've got these areas along Route 40. A lot of these future activity centers identified along Route 40, those are currently areas that are zoned with TNC, the TNC overlay. And so they've had the potential through an overlay to redevelop ever since they had that zoning. So we're looking at how we might be able to revise the zoning so that we might be able to incentivize that mixed use redevelopment here. This is downtown Columbia. The most significant opportunity for future mixed use redevelopment is in Gateway. But if I could share with you kind of the Gateway map, I mean, the future vision for Gateway is, it's a really wonderful vision. It's trying to, re-envision it as a mixed use innovation district where we're trying to drive both employment growth and residential growth. But there's a lot of properties here that are already developed. We don't have a whole lot of vacant land. And the current conditions here in Gateway, we've got 140 individual properties. So it's basically, it would be a redevelopment that would happen on a site-by-site basis. So again, it's not going to be fast. And the Gateway vision looks forward over 30 years. But for those who specifically want to see what the market demand is in Gateway, again, over 30 years, we could potentially see up to, the plan calls for up to 6,600 multifamily units, because in the general plan, it was really important to council and the community to see more affordable homeownership opportunities. They wanted us to think about how can we realize more homeownership potential within these future activity centers. So that could be through the development of missing middle housing types, but missing middle housing types are not as dense as multifamily. So how do we find a balance between the desired housing types in these areas? So again, but the great thing about Gateway is we do see opportunity for future non-residential development, right? So there could be an opportunity for up to 1.8 million non-residential square feet, which could yield an additional up to 8,100 new jobs. And currently there's about 10,000 jobs in Gateway. So if you want to go back to Jeff's presentation, so there's a lot of really great goals, a lot of guidance for mixed use redevelopment in these areas. We're going to have to look to rezoning and how we can create a zoning structure that will incentivize and catalyze the redevelopment in these areas, but it's not going to be an overnight process. It will take time.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. That's very, very helpful. Really puts things in perspective. Okay, so that's that slide. This is just to show that at our current zoning build out, there's a lot more apartments that are likely to be built compared to single family detached units based on the land use availability. And what this shows is, and I'm getting close to the end, if some of you may be getting sort of chart fatigue, which can certainly happens to me. So from 2010 to 2025, this is our capacity each year. And we do have rezonings along the way where we have piecemeal rezonings, for example. So we do add capacity along the way. So for example, this might have been when the Erickson development adding 1,200 units, age-restricted units was added. So our undeveloped capacity increases. And so currently, this is our capacity of about 17,000, 18,000 units. This reflects what I showed before of what's in process, plans that are under review, what's unbuilt, what's permitted, and this is the undeveloped capacity for plans that could come in the future. So it's the lowest it's been since 2010. And of course, once we do the comp rezoning, this is likely to increase. We've been increasing our capacity really with every general plan moving forward, and that's likely to continue. It's just more difficult now because we're in a redevelopment scenario, as you know, Mary explained with the HOCO by design policies. This really shows, this is kind of a precursor of what we could expect. These are pre-submission community meetings. So every new development that happens in Howard County, before they even submit a plan to Howard County, they have to have what's called a pre-submission community meeting out in the neighborhood where they're planning to develop. So they hold a meeting and they indicate how many units are going to be in their development, the types of units, the characteristics of the plan, and indicate to the neighbors that they're going to be submitting this to DPZ. It's just a way for the community to get an understanding that there's a development that may happen in a certain area. And so since 2007, when this was first required, we had about a 40 per year, but the number have dropped as the land development has decreased to about 25 per year. And these are the number of units that are in those meetings. So if you add up all the meetings and all the plans of single family detached, attached, and apartments in those plans, it's about 1,200 per year since 2007. And now we're averaging about 777 per year. And that's what we're seeing in building permits. So the pre-submissions that happened in 2025 and 2024, plans will be coming in for those over the next several years. So it's kind of a leading indicator, basically, of development trends. We do have a land use map. If you're interested, it's an interactive map on our website, and it gets down to the parcel level. It's updated regularly. The undeveloped residential is this light yellow. And if you were to zoom in and explore this map, which you're all encouraged to do, you'll get an idea of where the undeveloped residential is. And there isn't much. And that's why the capacity really is largely based on redevelopment opportunities moving forward. This map also highlights that we've preserved quite a bit of land in Howard County. Howard County has had a very strong land preservation policy since the 1980s, really, maybe even back to the 1970s. Like many counties in Maryland, because the state has environmental goals and ordinances, the western part of Howard County has been preserved for decades. And there's a planned service area line that goes like this. So there's no public water and sewer west of this line. So you can see there's more density here where you have public water and sewer, less density, single family detached, a little bit of commercial, but with goals of preserving a lot of land. And so we've done that over the last several decades and met the goals actually that were in the 1990 general plan, which is quite an accomplishment of land preservation. This is just to point out that there's competing goals with housing, right? And so that's one of the reasons why we have constraints is because of the amount of land that the county's preserved. And this is an update of our latest.
Hey, can I ask a question or make a comment, please?
Sure.
Oh, and you're about to get to it here.
Yeah.
On preserved land, this is Barb Glenn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the most recent data, but in 2024, late 2024, we had almost 38,000 total acres in agricultural land, and over 62% of it had been preserved through our ag land preservation program. So I appreciate you bringing up the point that, we have competing interests with respect to preservation of land, and some of it is in perpetuity already. So
Yes.
There you go. You can see it right there in your chart. So go ahead, finish your thought. Thank you.
Exactly. So that's right on line. So so we preserved 40% of all land in the county is preserved, and that's split between the preservation easements, which are basically they're owned by individuals but there's an easement placed on them, so it prohibits development. So it's basically for either environmental preservation purposes or agricultural preservation purposes. And that's this 21%. And then there's also quite a bit of open space and parkland. And that includes the county park system. It includes the state park, all this Patapsco Park. And it includes this large WSSC, which is the Washington Suburban Sanitary District, which is this is the reservoir that's water for Montgomery County primarily, a little bit of Howard County, but this is preserved for water quality purposes. It's been that way for years. And then of course in Columbia we have all of the CA permanent open space in Columbia as well. So it does add up to almost 19% of land, parks, and open space.
Yeah, this is Barb again. It becomes a strong narrative in our HOCO by design that we, from Farm Bureau, we were bird dogging at that time. So it is a part of the quality of our life. So thanks so much, Jeff, for going over the detail. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, and it was discussed in HOCO by design, and there was discussion of moving this planned service area further west. And so we did quite a bit of analysis on that, the potential. You probably were well aware of that. But one of the things is there's already so much preserved land along the line itself. You can't really move the line at this point. So it's policy that was made a long time ago that's now a reality.
Yeah. And I just like to point out on a national basis the prominence that Howard County has in specifically agricultural land preservation is noted across the agricultural community. So Howard County has been a forerunner historically in this, I'll call it space, using air quotes. So thanks so much, Jeff.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. So just
Jeff, one quick question on that pie chart, the 10,000 roughly undeveloped acres. Any sense of how much of that 10,000 acres, I know it's undeveloped and it's non-preserved, but is it developable? Is it steep slopes? Is it wetlands? Is it floodplain and so forth that can't be developed anyway?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And if you look at HOCO by design, also HOCO by design indicates that 2% of land is undeveloped. So that looked into it in more detail. It's something I think that we need to revisit, because now that we're getting down to not much land left, it's going to be really important to understand where that is and what factors it has, all those things that you mentioned. So I think it's an exercise that we're going to be doing, and it will be part of the comprehensive rezoning effort.
So if I could just chime in on the undeveloped land. So we do have a map in HOCO by design. I'm just going to again quickly share my screen. Sorry, Jeff, to get you off the screen for a minute. But this is a map that we do have in HOCO by design, development and preservation map in chapter 2. And this is basically identifying where we have a lot of the undeveloped parcels throughout the county. On average, they're smaller than 5 acres. And Todd, as you said, yes, a lot of them are highly resourced with a lot of environmental features. So they're not going to be really the best sites to target for any kind of new development. I mean, that's why we tried to create a redevelopment strategy in HOCO by design and target activity centers and create more opportunities for those more diverse housing types, missing middle housing types through our infill development. But these are basically where those undeveloped parcels are.
And it's interesting, actually, looking at that. That's helpful. Almost all of those parcels are outside the service area, which means that you're talking about 3 or 4 acres per unit.
Yep. And also with a lot of environmental features on those sites.
Right. So it takes that 10,000 and it turns it into, I don't know what, 1,000 units, maybe 1,500 units, unless you change the service line, right?
Yeah. But the goal of the general plan, just to be clear, isn't necessarily to develop all of those undeveloped sites because of the environmental resources on them. The goal is to try to encourage and facilitate the redevelopment.
I have a question. And maybe it's out of order what we're doing, but as far as commercial or industrial development, we recognize that this county is very dependent on residential, the taxes from residentials. Is there any future? Because it seems like we're only talking about residential, but is there any future in possibilities of industrial or commercial development that would be significant enough to help us with the tax base?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And definitely that was kind of the very last part of this. Jobs are definitely important and part of the equation, and they do generate tax revenues for the county. So it's important to have jobs added to the county as well. Mary mentioned, for the Gateway Master Plan, one of the great opportunities is for new job growth in that office park, in that Gateway redevelopment park, because of its location, primarily along Route 95. Really, a lot of job opportunities. So yeah, that's a point well taken. And these are just a few slides. I would consider these preliminary. I think Dr. Clinch is going to be presenting more details in jobs when more data comes out. But this comes from, I just put this together very quickly. This comes from Department of Labor data, QCEW. So it's only wage and salary jobs. It doesn't include proprietary jobs. But you can see the trend that there has been job growth in Howard County. However, the last quarter there was a job loss from first quarter 2024 to first quarter 2025. So it doesn't have the impact, really, it doesn't reflect the impact of what's happened since then with the federal job situation and the federal job loss. So that's something to keep in mind in the next month or so when more data comes out for that. And then this is the types of jobs in Howard County. Most of them are professional and business services, followed by trade, transportation, and utilities, and then education and health services, and then local government, which includes schools, is the fourth. And this is for the 1 year, first quarter 2024 to 2025, the job change. So you can see where jobs were lost and where jobs were gained. Jobs were gained in leisure and hospitality, financial activities, and local government. Jobs were lost primarily in information and professional and business services. Those, of course, were some of the biggest job categories, so you'd expect more losses from that larger base. And this shows the unemployment rates. So Howard County compared to Maryland, compared to the US. Generally, Howard County is lower in Maryland, which is lower than the US, although unemployment has increased at least into 2024. These are the employment rates here. You can see Howard County is at 3.4 as of July 2025 compared to the 3.8 in Maryland. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Really appreciate all the questions during the presentation. It made it very nice for me to present that way.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, very much, and also great questions there. And just before we ask around any other comments, I just want to ask Mary. I know you share some very hopeful insight about some of the future development on there. Is there anything else that you want to share with the group? It looks like you already put together something which I didn't realize that. Thank you.
Oh no, this was just some of the slide deck that I had from last year, and as people were talking,
just like highlight some of the points.
Yeah, and I was digging through the general plan as everybody was talking.
Got it.
Yeah, but I guess just to speak a little bit to the job growth point, which again, everybody's making really, really great points here. The general plan does anticipate future job growth, especially in Gateway. I mean, we do see Gateway as a place where employment opportunities can significantly grow through creating, making that what we're calling an innovation district, where we can build on a lot of the successful sectors and industries that are already there and create more opportunities for them to grow and thrive. But of course, as people move here for more jobs, we do want to try to create, of course, residential housing opportunities for them as well. But anyway, does anybody have any other general plan questions for me or Gateway questions? Or turn back to Holly.
And by the way, just as Mary mentioned that about the future development, and to Jackie's point earlier on that the county is looking at both residential and economic and business commercial base growth there. And actually next week, EDA, Jennifer Johnson and others going to talk about some efforts, particularly try to promote economic development. A lot of part is really about how to grow our commercial base on that, which is really very important in terms of both current and long-term drivers for the county's development there. So that is a very valid point, and we are working on that, and there will be more information shared on that perspective next week.
Holly, this is Barb Glenn.
Yeah,
thank you for that summary comment. And Mary, thanks for your input too, and Jeff. But I just wanted to point out that this econ task force that Dr. Ball initiated, I don't know, several months ago, I think the final report's coming out like February 2, if that's a Monday. And there were various sections in there pointing to economic drivers. I'm sure Jennifer Jones will go over some of those next week. But in terms of job growth and workforce development, I think there's some things that will be aggressively impactful. So it all kind of comes together, but you might want to take a peek at that report when it comes out, again, from an advisory group, not from the experts in the HOCO government. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara, for the comments on that there. That's a really good point. And actually, the original plan is actually to have the Econ Task Force Chair Angela Capello from the County Executive Office there to share some insight after the full report get finished, as you mentioned that in early January. So we already invited her to see whether it can make time in one of the meetings in early February to share a little bit the key recommendation or conclusion from the task force, because everything's relevant. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question for Mary specifically on Gateway. Jeff had mentioned, and it's kind of in line with my thinking on it, is that it's probably 10 years before we start to see any residential progress within Gateway. Is that due just to the strategy of how it's anticipated that Gateway will redevelop, and that is that all the county can really do at this point is change the zoning on individual parcels? Is that right? And then we let the market determine how to proceed within the new zoning for Gateway?
Yeah, I think that's about right. So first step with Gateway is we have to get through the rezoning. The Gateway Master Plan does talk about the importance of developing some sort of incentive zoning structure. So how can you incentivize the right mix of uses that the master plan says that we want to see there? So through incentives, maybe we can kind of catalyze redevelopment more quickly, but it will absolutely take time because it's an already developed area. We have some buildings do actually have higher vacancy rates than others, but a lot of existing buildings are going to have to wait out their existing leases before, if any property owner decides they want to take on any particular redevelopment. But yeah, so we'll get the zoning in place, but then those individual property owners will have to do what they need to do on their end with their existing leases or whatever's on their property before they can get to a place where they can redevelop.
And it's now anticipated that the front door, if you will, for Gateway is going to be the extension of 108 across 175. Is that correct? And if so, given that that's going through an environmentally sensitive area and it's a very tough traffic area with 95, 175, and 108 all right on top of one another, is that something that's already underway between the county and the state to get state approval for that entrance point for Gateway?
Yeah, so that's another next step in the process to really continue to do a more thorough evaluation with SHA and with our property owners in Gateway to determine where the exact location of that front door would be. But you're right, the master plan does recommend that we create a front door up around 175 and 108. So the next steps would be to work closely with SHA. So we've had some conversations with SHA where they can kind of start to look at our research, and then we have to determine what the next steps are with how do we continue to further our evaluation efforts.
So that goes forward in parallel with anything with respect to rezoning?
Yes.
Well, at least it's in parallel. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jeff and Mary, for very, very robust, informative presentation today. And also, so glad that there was a lot of great questions and comments from the committee, which is wonderful. Just going around one more time, any question, comments, and then we'll adjourn the meeting. Okay, no more than next week. We'll look forward to hear from EDA and also business panel, continue the discussion actually on some what we had today about how to promote the economic development in the county and also where we are currently from the business perspective and EDA's perspective on that. And so I want to thank everybody again for coming up early and continue discussion. And you might have a little bit of time to take another cup of coffee this morning. We give back 20 minutes. Thank you, everyone. See you all next week. Yeah. Bye.